Hey there YouTube, Nicholas from Game Dev Maniacs here. Welcome to the second video in the beginner series where we're going to be learning how to make a simple 2D action game from scratch called Showdown. So in this video we're going to be learning about our game engine called Pico 8. We're going to start adding a couple of graphics to our game and we're going to start doing a little bit of code. So to get started, I want you to go and visit this URL pico-8-edu.com. Once you're in Pico 8, press the play button to get started. This starts the console. You're now in the terminal. There's a couple of useful things that you can do here. This is a place where you will save your game, load an existing game, publish your game, or just simply run your game. Actually, let's start by doing this. We're going to be saving our game quite a lot throughout this series, so let's learn how to do that. You save your game by typing save, space, and then the name of either your file or the name of your game. So here we're going to put save Showdown. I'm going to press enter and it's going to save it to my computer. You can load a game by either dragging and dropping it from your computer, or you can type load and the name of your game. For example, here we're just going to reload Showdown. You can run your game by typing run. And as you can see, because our game is empty, it currently doesn't do anything. Now, saving and running our game are things that we're going to be doing constantly, so it's important to learn some of the keyboard shortcuts that are associated with those actions. To save the game, you can hit Ctrl-S or Command-S if you're on Mac. To run the game, you can hit Ctrl-R or Command-R if you're on Mac. As you can see, it still does nothing. So that being said, we're now going to start putting things into the engine and writing our game so that something can start happening. For that, I'm going to be pressing the escape key. This brings us to the editor itself. As you can see at the top, there is 5 tabs within the editor. This is the code editor tab. This is where we put our logic and instructions for the game. The second tab here is called the sprite editor, and we're going to be spending some time in this video working on this. This third tab here is the map editor. This is where you can build maps, backgrounds, and so forth. The fourth tab here is the sound effect editor, and the fifth tab is the music editor. So let's go ahead and start playing around with some of those tabs. We're going to be learning how these tabs operate. I'm going to go back to the sprite editor, and we're going to start working on our images. Let me take just a couple of minutes to talk you through this screen. So in the sprite editor, there is multiple areas. This area here is the editor panel. This is where you will be starting to draw your sprites and your pixels and your images. On the right hand side, you have a color picker. You left click on a color to select it, and then you can draw pixels with the left mouse button inside your screen. You can pick another color and continue the process to draw your images. There's another shortcut to pick other colors, which is the right click. So if you right click on a color, you can oscillate between several colors that are already within your sprite. This is the brush size. Right now, I have selected a 1x1 pixels brush, but I can go 2x2, 3x3, or 5x5. This here is the zoom level. And right now, as you can see, the sprite that I'm editing is 8 pixel width by 8 pixel height. I can zoom out 3 times to edit a sprite that is 64 pixels by 64 pixels. I strongly recommend to stay with some of the lower zoom resolutions. It's a lot easier to work with. The buttons here below are called flags, and these are used to refer to classes of sprites within our code. We're actually not going to be touching this right away and keeping that for a more advanced lesson. At the bottom here, you will find the toolbar. This is the first tool, the draw tool, and as you saw, we've already been using this to put pixels on our editor panel. This is the selection tool, and when you click it, you can select a portion of your screen, and then you can use Ctrl-C and Command-V or Ctrl-V to paste it in another sprite or in another area. Here I'm going to take another empty sprite and paste it in place. Sometimes when you paste it, it doesn't necessarily go where you want it to go. And so an important tool here is the stump tool. You can use this to stump your area wherever you need to be. And you can do that, repeat the operation multiple times. This is the pan tool, and you can either use the middle mouse button and drag, or you can use the space key and drag. And this is useful to know how some sprites connect with sprites that are neighbors to it. This is the paint tool. I will pick a color and just paint just like any other drawing tool. And then this is the circle tool. This is handy to draw circles directly. You can either draw empty circles like this, or if you hit the control key and draw your circle, it will be a filled circle. Another important item here is the number of the sprite. Here you can see a preview, and here you can see the number that's associated with the sprite. So this is sprite number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. You can go all the way until 64 sprites of 8 by 8 pixels per page, and there's 4 pages that you can work with. So in total, in Pico 8, you can have up to 256 sprites that are size 8 by 8. Each of the sprites can also be used in the map editor. But for now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be drawing some of those sprites into our game directly. So I'm going to take this first sprite here, sprite number 1, and we're going to start typing instructions into our code so that our game can start displaying this. As you can see, if I start running my game right away, I'm going to hit Control R to run the game. It's not going to do anything. If I press Escape again, it brings me back here. The reason why it's not doing anything is because our code editor is empty. We currently don't have any instructions to tell the game what to do and what to display. We've created a lot of images, and we need to tell the computer where to draw which picture at which point in time. For that, we're going to need to learn a little bit about some instructions that we can run in Pico 8. The game engine Pico 8 contains a set of instructions that we can easily use to do things like place pixels on the screen or place sprites and images on the screen. The way that we use those instructions is by typing the name of the instruction or the command. We follow it up with parentheses, and then within those parentheses, we specify what we call arguments. These are additional parameters that help Pico 8 know how to use the function. It may seem a little bit complex, but actually it's going to be extremely simple. Let me illustrate with an argument. Here, there's a command called print, and Pico 8 requires you to specify what is it that you want to print on the screen. And so with the command print, you need to specify the contents as part of the arguments. Let me show you exactly what this looks like inside the game engine. Inside the game engine, go ahead and click on the code editor. As you can see, it's currently empty, but we're going to start filling it with instructions. Let's use this print command. So I'm going to type print, and as you can see, the word just turned green as to indicate that this is an instruction accepted by Pico 8. I'm going to open up the parentheses, and I'm going to specify what I want the game engine to print. In this case, I'm just going to enter a number, 42. Don't forget to close the parentheses and hit enter. Now we're going to run the game, and before that, just as a quick reflex, don't forget to save by hitting Control S or Command S, and then hit Control R or Command R to run the game. Alright, so as you can see, it printed the number 42. It's just as simple as that. Let's look at another instruction. The instruction CLS, and it contains no arguments, simply clears the screen. This is what it does. Let's go ahead and press Escape to go back to our code editor. And we're going to type CLS. As you can see, it turned green again. Open the parentheses and close the parentheses. Hit Control S or Command S to save, and then Control R or Command R to run. As you can see, it cleared the screen to black. What's interesting here is that the word 42 actually disappeared from the screen. And the reason for that, as you press Escape again to look at your code, is that first we actually printed 42, but then we cleared the screen right after that, meaning that the screen is now in an empty state. Let's go ahead and take the CLS command and bring it above the 42. I'm going to select this text, copy it, and just paste it above. You can do that with your mouse as well. Let's go ahead and save by hitting Control S and then Control R to run it. And as you can see now, we've cleared the screen and we've printed 42. The program is now exited and we are back inside the terminal. In order to place graphics on the screen, we're going to need to talk a little bit about pixel positioning. The game screen is like a giant grid made of small squares. The position of a pixel is defined by its distance to the left border of the screen and its distance to the top border of the screen. That can be found by simply counting the number of squares or pixels to the left and to the top. For example, here is a single blue pixel. It is placed 4 pixels from the left and 6 pixels from the top. For the sake of simplicity, the position on the horizontal axis is often called X, while the position on the vertical axis is often called Y. We can say that this pixel is currently positioned at X4, Y6. By combining various pixels on the screen, you can create graphic entities called sprites. For example, here's a simple sprite representing a smiley face. In Pico 8, the game screen only has 128 pixels horizontally and 128 pixels vertically. Each pixel can only be one of 16 colors available. That's not a lot, and that's actually a good thing for learning as it keeps things very simple. However, with some time and talent, you can actually create some pretty amazingly complex and detailed pictures in Pico 8. We're going to be positioning pixels a lot, so make sure that you have understood this section well before moving forward. Let's take a look at another instruction provided by Pico 8. This is the sprite command, and this instruction is used by typing SPR, and then in the arguments, we specify the sprite number and then the position at which we want Pico 8 to draw the sprite. Let's take a look at that in action. Let's press the escape key. As we go to the sprite editor and look at the sprites that we've created, keep in mind that this is the number of the sprite. This is sprite number 1, 2, and 3. Let's go ahead and take sprite number 5 and instruct Pico 8 to draw it on the screen. I'm going to go back to the code editor, and below my print command, I'm going to type SPR 5 for the 5th sprite, and then let's give it a location. Remember that it cannot be bigger than 128 pixels, both vertically and horizontally. Let's go ahead and place it somewhere in the middle. We'll type 50, 50. The first 50 is going to be the X coordinate, while the second 50 is the Y coordinate. Don't forget to close the parentheses, hit enter, hit Ctrl S to save your game, and hit Ctrl R to run the game. And there it is. The sprite is now apparent on the screen. Let's talk about our map editor. Start by pressing escape to go back to the editor. We are currently in the sprite editor. Go ahead and click on the third tab called the map editor. This is our map. This is what we're going to be using to draw our background. As you can see, you also have access to the sprites at the bottom. You also have access to the same toolbar as in the sprite editor. The way that you draw inside this map is by picking sprites and simply drawing the sprites directly on your map. This is very similar to building sprites, except here you're putting tiles or cells inside your map directly. It's interesting that you can also zoom in and out using the mouse wheel, and this allows you to know and to see how big the map actually is. We're going to zoom back, and what we're going to start doing now is create the tiles for our game. And for that, what we're going to be doing is going back to our sprite editor, and we're going to clear everything that we've done so far so that our sprites actually correspond to what we want to do. I'm going to go ahead and take the fill, take the black color, and then just start painting over. One of the most important shortcuts that I forgot to mention is Ctrl Z or Command Z. This allows you to undo any change that you may have done. This is so handy and extremely helpful anytime you make any mistakes. Don't forget to use it. Let's go ahead and save, and let's go back to our draw tool, and we will start now drawing the various tiles that will create our background. We want to have some sort of Far West theme to this. So let's start by drawing the sky. And for that, we're just going to pick an empty sprite and then just fill it completely with blue. I'm going to pick the fill tool, the blue color, and just click here to fill it completely in blue. I'm now going to go back to the map editor, and we're going to be using this new tile here to paint our background. I can either use the draw tool or simply use the fill tool to fill the entire screen completely in blue. Let's go ahead and draw some ground texture. We're going to go back to the sprite editor and pick an empty sprite. Let's go ahead and pick some colors that would map to some sort of sand material. And what I'm going to be doing is just drawing a top portion that will represent the ground on which the characters will stand. A little bit of alteration here. I'm going to be picking this lighter version and just fill the bottom portion of it. This is going to be our ground area. Now let's go to the map editor and then use this to draw the ground on which the players will stand. I'm just going to draw a line here. As you can see, we still have some sky portion here. And I can't really use the same tile as the one I just created, otherwise it will just create an additional ground. I'm going to use Control Z or Command Z to undo this change, and I'm going to go back to the sprite editor. I'm going to pick an empty sprite, and I'm just going to fill the content with this light sand texture. I'm going to go back to our map editor, and now we can use this new tile to fill the bottom portion of our screen so that it looks a little bit better. Now both the sky and the sand look a little bit bland. So one thing that we could do to improve this is go back to our sprite editor, pick another empty sprite, also fill it with this light sand version, and then we can, with the draw tool, put a couple of alterations, maybe gold nuggets somewhere that we can put inside our map. Let's go back to the map editor, and with this new sprite selected, I'm just going to put a couple of those things left and right. Not too much, but enough for the map to look a little bit better. Feel free to do something similar for the sky. Actually, what would be really good is for you to go through the exercise of creating a sprite of your own. Why don't you do that, pause the video, and create some sort of cactus sprite that we can place somewhere on the ground area. Go ahead and pause the video now, draw a cactus, and try to bring it inside the map editor. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to go through that exercise. Let me walk you through how I would do it. I will go through the sprite editor and pick an empty sprite, and here I'm going to draw a cactus. And let's go ahead and draw maybe a minimum version of a cactus. Something like this should do. So let me bring it up. There we go. And I'm going to the map editor. And hopefully, if you have done this exercise on your end, you're going to see the problem that I'm going to be facing. As I place this cactus, it now shows the background in black. And you could have expected Pico 8 to know that we didn't want black to be drawn behind the cactus. But actually, when you draw a map, it's impossible for Pico 8, for the game engine, to know what color is supposed to be transparent when you draw a map. So what you need to do is go back to the sprite editor and then just fill the empty area with the same color as you had for the sky. So you go back to the map editor, you're going to see that this automatically updates the sprite, and so it automatically fixes the map as well. Let's go ahead and add a couple more of those cactus. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Maybe before we move on, we are going to be drawing maybe a cloud. So in order to draw a cloud, we're actually going to do an interesting item here. We're going to have a sprite that spans two sprites. So it's going to be a little bit longer. Now, to do that, I'm going to go back to the sprite editor, and rather than edit a single sprite here, I'm going to be zooming out so that the sprite content spans to 16 pixels by 16 pixels instead of 8 by 8. Let me go ahead and take some gray and white to draw our cloud, and I will just do something very simple. Something like this. and maybe I will use a little bit of gray at the bottom here. All right, and I think this will be good enough. Now I'm going to de-zoom here, and as you can see, if I pan around using the middle mouse click and moving around, you can see that those things are connected. It's sometimes hard to do that if you're only focused on one half, and so it's important that you are able to zoom out or to just pan the picture. So with that being said, we're now going to move back to our map editor, and we're going to start placing our sky. And one thing that I forgot to do, as you can see, is the background here is going to be black. So let me go back to the sprite editor and then just fill this portion here with our sky texture. There we go. Going back into our map editor, I'm going to take these two sprites and then just start positioning them somewhere on our screen. All right, and this is going to be looking good enough for our background right now. Don't forget to save by hitting Ctrl S or Command S, and you can run the game by hitting Ctrl R or Command R. Now, you might be disappointed here because you actually don't see what we just drew. And again, the reason, if you press the Escape key and you go to the code editor, is that we only gave some instructions to the game engine to first clear the screen, print the number 42, and then take the sprite that is number 5 and then put it somewhere in the middle of the screen. So we're going to be learning how to take what we drew into the map and use an instruction provided to us by Pico 8, by the game engine, so that it can actually draw it when we run the game. In the map editor, we position tiles or cells. We can define the position of a cell by simply counting the number of cells to its left and the number of cells to its top, similarly to how we do positioning of a pixel. For example here, this cell is located at x3 and y2 because it has 3 cells on the left and 2 cells on the top. The very first cell here has for coordinate x0 and y0. There is a very handy functionality in Pico 8 to indicate how to draw the map into the game. But for that, Pico 8 requires to know which is going to be the top left portion of the screen that it needs to draw. And it requires us to specify that as a cell coordinate. So if we were to tell Pico 8, start drawing the map using the cell x3 and y2, Pico 8 is going to take this cell as the top left corner of the screen that it's going to draw. And it's going to generate this portion of the screen into our game. The function map takes 4 arguments. The first 2 indicate which cell do we start drawing as the top left portion of our map. And the second 2 arguments, x and y, are where in our screen should these be positioned. In our game, we started by drawing everything in the top left cell, which means that when we write the map command, we're going to be indicating 0 and 0 here. Let's go ahead and try this out. Let's move over to the code editor if you're not there and press enter to start typing the map command. As you can see, the keyboard turns green again, and we want to pick the very first cell that's at the top left. Again, the reason for that is because in our map editor, we want to have Pico 8 start drawing our map and our background from the top left portion here. Going back to the code editor, I'm going to press 0, 0, and I want Pico 8 to start drawing this at the top left portion of our screen inside the game. I'm going to also enter 0, 0. Press Ctrl S to save and Ctrl R to run. And there we go. Pico 8 has now rendered our background and we're all ready to start moving to the next phase. This is going to be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to start talking a little bit about more coding and the game loop. See you in the next one.